Alright, so welcome back and thanks for joining me. In this video I'll be taking care of some drywall patchwork. I'm going to be going over some of the techniques, how I use them and why I use them, and how I go about repairing an acoustic ceiling, better known as popcorn ceiling. Alright, one of the most important parts of this type of job is how you begin. And that all comes down to prep work. Good prep work eliminates a lot of frustration down the line. And it increases your chances of ending up with a successful finished product. A lot of times people rush into this type of work, and that's where things usually go wrong. So first step is you want to remove any loose or frayed drywall paper. Essentially you want to clean up the edge of the drywall where the patchwork is at, or where the patch meets the existing drywall. You want to use a sharp blade for this. Ideally, a brand new blade is ideally when doing drywall work. You want to have a pack of blades regardless. A sharp blade makes a world of a difference when doing drywall work. So what you want to do, you want to score the edges of the drywall, kind of creating like a V groove. This gives the mud somewhere to sit into. And also when you're applying your tape and your mud over the tape, you have a nice clean flat surface. Okay, so next you want to grab a 5-inch taping knife and scrape off as much of the existing texture as you can. You don't have to be perfect. The goal here is to just remove most of the acoustic. We're going to be covering this with joint compound anyways. We're going to be doing one pre-fill while embedding the tape, followed by 2 skim coats. So because of that, you don't need to remove every last bit of texture, but just focus on knocking down at least the bulk of it. Especially on a small patch like this, you don't have to get it perfect. So next, you want to apply your tape. You don't want to use paper tape with quick setting or quick drying mud. You want to use mesh tape. I see a lot of people that use paper tape with hot mud, and that is the improper use of paper tape. Now there is instances where paper tape is better. Paper tape does have greater shear strength than mesh tape, but with this combination, since hot mud has more glue, it dries harder. It's a good combination with mesh tape. You don't want to use pre-mixed topping mud with mesh tape, because topping mud is not as strong as hot mud. So you want to make sure you use the correct products. And what you want to do is you don't want to apply too much mud that you're going to have to sand out off a whole lot of it later on. So the key here is to just apply enough to embed the tape, kind of cover the tape a little bit, cover the seam, and remove the excess. And then if you have to, you could go over it again with a second coat once this first coat is set enough that it's sturdy enough. So that's what we're going to be doing here. The way that you hold the knife too matters. See how I kind of like have 2 fingers behind the blade, forcing it or pushing the mud into the seam, and then also removing it. Sometimes I see people grab it like they're grabbing a stick, like they're about to swing a stick. That is the improper way of holding it. You wouldn't hold a pencil like you grab a spoon or a fork, because they're too different. You're doing 2 different tasks. So you just have to kind of get used to how to hold the knife. And right now we're going to just be embedding the tape and covering the seams, and then once this sets a little bit, we're going to be going over it with 2 skim coats. Like I said, it don't have to be perfect for this type of patchwork, because we're going to be applying heavy texture on it, which is popcorn or acoustic texture. So that'll cover a lot of the imperfections. I won't be sanding this. I'll probably take a wet sponge and kind of feather out the edges. But as for sanding with sandpaper, there's no need for that. A lot of the bad patchwork that I see is people applying too much mud and then trying to apply a second coat to cover up the humps or the lift offs, I guess, of the mud. So what they're doing, they're applying too much mud to begin with, and they're applying more mud on top of that, and then they go and try to sand it, and it creates a big mess, and they give up midway sanding, and then they'll just call it good, and they'll just paint over it. And like I said, it creates more frustration, and you're not going to have a good finished product. So the key thing is to remove, in every layer that you do, remove most of the mud off. That way it eliminates the need to sand. And then you could take a wet sponge, preferably there's grouting sponges that have that are the yellow sponges that have an abrasive backside, the white abrasive side. So I'll use the yellow soft sponge to kind of wet the mud again, and I use the abrasive side to kind of sand and feather out the edges or any takeoffs or any ridges. So this mud right here, I kind of mix it a little stiff or a little thicker than my top coat, just to, I guess to get a little build up, not too much. Like I said, I remove most of it, but then the skim coat, I'll mix it a little looser or a little thinner, just to kind of skim coat over it. Right here, I had already skim coated. I didn't show that part, but and let the mud set up, and then I went over it. By the time I cleaned up the pan and mixed some more mud, it was stiff enough already, so I just went back over and I kind of skim coated it. I used I think it was like an 8-inch or a 10-inch knife for this part, and I'm gonna go ahead and take a sponge and kind of feather it out. I didn't show that here either. I didn't record it, but I kind of used the sponge. I kind of dampened the mud again, and then I used the sponge to kind of feather it out. And right here, I'm going to use a texture in a can that you buy from Home Depot. The key thing here is to, or at least the trick that I use is, I run it under hot water to kind of build up the pressure inside so that it sprays better. And I'll spray about half of the can, and then I'll go back and then I'll run it under hot water again. You could use a heat gun too, I guess, but I run it under hot water again, and then I'll finish spraying the rest. I used one can here only. It probably wasn't enough. I could have probably used another can, but since it's in the closet, it's not that big of a deal. It still looked pretty good for the patch that it is. And here I'm finishing off the rest of the can. Like I said, I ran it under hot water just to kind of get more pressure within the can, so when it sprays out more uniformly. And also, don't try to squeeze every last bit out of the can, because whatever comes out of the can towards the end, it's gonna be blotchy, or like you're gonna get like bigger chunks and stuff. It's not gonna spray it as nice or as cleanly, and you're gonna ruin the finish. So just kind of, once you see that it's kind of done and the can's not really spraying as easily as it was when it was full, I would just stop there. And there you have it. This is a finished product, and it looks, it looks great. See how I'm starting to get some of those clumps. That's kind of towards the end of the can, so they tend to do that. You could also use a hopper for this, which is a little trickier, a little bit more of a setup, but since this is a small patch, I could get away with these cans. Maybe buy 2 or 3, just to be safe. You don't want to run out mid-job. You could return the other one if you don't use it. But there you have it. A nice patchwork. It's blended well. You can't see the patchwork. Once it starts drying, you can kind of see the lines where the mud hasn't fully dried yet. It looks darker and wetter. It kind of looks like the seams are going to show, but they don't. Once everything dries, it dries to a uniform color. And there you have it. That is how you get a good acoustic ceiling texture. Alright, that's gonna do it for this one. Hopefully this helps you avoid some of the common mistakes I see with popcorn ceiling repairs. If you got any questions or want to see any specific repair, drop it in the comments, like and subscribe if this was helpful, and I'll catch you on the next video.